Swabshkimigwan Indigenous Nagignan. I'm happy to see everyone today. My name is Mary Hermes. In English, it's Swabshkimigwan in Ojibwe. And I'm very excited today to see everybody to talk again about the subject of revitalization and especially about nests and right now in the home as we're having COVID. What are we doing for our children and our parents and our elders trying to be together in nests? Let's see. I always like to start with acknowledging our elders that are here, our Chiaya Ag. And if they want to say anything, we have Doreen and Ojibwemotaadidaa and Nigani Benes. And if I've missed anyone, if you want to say anything or just wave, we can't see you, Doreen.
Bonjour, Niminandang Nagosieg. Bonjour.
Miigwech, Minandam no go Witabum Neko Kumano, Gomino, Aisha Chicken.
Oh, wow.
The Shani go say.
Very encouraging to have you with us and for your words, Miigwech. I want to just start today by saying a little bit about Ojibwemotaadidaa Omaa Gidakiiminaang, for those of you who don't know, and sort of to brief our speakers and preface our conversation today. And then I'm going to introduce our speakers, and we have two of them today. We're super excited. So we'll give them each about a half an hour. We'll take a break, and then we'll open it for discussions because we think that Leanne and Joey will have a lot to say to each other, and whatever you have to say to them as well will be welcome. So that's our format. So a little bit about Ojibwemotaadidaa Omaa Gidakiiminaang started in 2011. And as I recall, it was young people who had graduated from the university and taken all the classes, but really wanted to make that leap into speaking Ojibwe in the homes, which we all know as revitalizers, that there is a leap between school and home. And it's often not addressed. We can't just rely on our schools. So they started a fabulous program for adult immersion, which is the Ojibwemotaadidaa Gidakiiminaang Academy. And it was so popular because they had first speakers right there for us to work with. They would have 4 or 5 speakers. We had a 2-week intensive summer camp, and we would do outdoor and traditional things, gather bark, trap beaver, whatever was in season. So it was really quite amazing. They've worked with over 200 students in their time, and just recently made this move not to isolate parents in a camp with elders, but to bridge out and say, we're parents who have enough proficiency. We want to raise our kids in Ojibwe. And those parents have come together. And that's the topic at hand. Those parents who have children who are under the age of 3. There's 5 parents, families, and they work with about 6 elders. And they will be having a house in March, hopefully, where they all can be together under one roof. So 3 generations of a sort of a master apprentice in a way, and doing it together. And so this is why we've reached out to our Mohawk and our, who else did we have? We had, I'm blanking now, Tatum from the Mohawk Nation last week. Before that, we had Kendall King, and before that, we opened with Rochelle Allen, who's raising her children at home, started with no experience herself whatsoever, and decided just to go for it, and has been doing it for 5 years very successfully. So that's where we're at. Did I leave anything out? Anybody from OOG want to say anything more about the OOG program? OOG is its affectionate name, since Ojibwemotaadidaa Omaa Gidakiiminaang is kind of long. Nancy's been with the program since the starting. Our leader is Wezawa Benesik. She's a little shy, so I'm not going to say too much about her, but she's done a fabulous job. Yeah, really grateful to you. All right. So that's a little bit about what we're doing here today. I'll move to introducing our speakers and then hear what they have to say. So we're really delighted today to have two longtime language advocates and activists with us. I'll start with the elder. As Joey said, we have an elder. Her name is Leanne Hinton. She's out in California, and she's an emeritus professor of linguistics at the University of California, Berkeley. I can just give you a couple of highlights. She's also very humble, but she's a co-founder and advisory board member of the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival, and she's a co-designer and co-organizer of the Master Apprentice Language Learning Program and the Breath of Life Archival Institute for Indigenous California Languages. When I was helping to get Wadiswan going, the Green Book of Language Revitalization was one of the only things around, and I looked up all of those authors and I called them. So thank you for connecting us that way. I also think her book, How to Keep Your Language Alive, which is a lot of teaching strategies that are outside language teaching, is fabulous for anybody trying to learn at home. Yeah, so that's Leanne. I'll let her go first, and I'll give you a little intro about Joey. We have Joey Awonohopay here. And his real name is, help me out here. Pakachike.
Yeah.
Pakachike.
Hey.
Miigwech. He has 9 years of service as the Director of Language and Culture for the Menominee Nation. He was a teacher in the middle school for 12 years and a singing and drumming teacher for a total of 15 years. He served on the Menominee Language and Culture Commission for 10 years, 5 of those as chair. He oversees teacher compliance, professional development, testing, all that fun stuff, immersion teachers, and Menominee tribal elders. He also oversees the Menominee Language Immersion training program. So with that, I'm going to ask Leanne to go first. Bonjour, Rochelle, miigwech bijayan. And Leanne and Joey, I just wanted to ask if it's all right if we record for people who are not here.
Fine with me.
Yep.
Okay. And we haven't figured out how to handle, we want to send out the recordings to everyone, but we realize we haven't gotten permission for people who are on the Zoom call. So I think we're going to be sending out a permission to everybody who's been on these calls so we can release those videos. So look for that in your big inboxes. Miigwech so much, Leanne, for joining us. So delighted you could come today.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm really happy to be here. I think Zoom has become such an important part of our language revitalization efforts that I think it's going to outlast the pandemic. It's such a wonderful way to get people together without forcing them to travel long distances and figuring out hotels and all of these things. So as Mary said, I belong to the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival, an organization that was founded in 1992. And the very first program that we developed was the Master Apprentice Language Learning Program for adults. And the reason for that is that California, which, as you may know, is exceedingly linguistically diverse and has many groups of very small populations, and went through some, like just about everybody, went through some really severe genocide, and there's hardly any actual native speakers left that have actually grown up speaking the language. And in 1992, even the youngest native speakers were grandparent age. and or even great grandparent age, or almost half the languages hadn't had any speakers for a long time. And so we had to figure out what can we do? I mean, we couldn't at that point have, for example, a school. You know, we would have loved to have immersion schools and language nests and so on, but there was nobody who could actually teach in those schools, who could actually speak the language well enough to teach it, or who weren't way past retirement age. And so we figured that we would have to focus on young adult learning, people who were of parent age and professional age, that could learn the language well enough to try to carry it on. And the results were for some tribes, for the larger tribes, that there became enough speakers through the Master Apprentice program to really develop some good school programs. And a few of those are up in Northern California, like the Yuroks and the Hupas and the Karuks. So they have some school programs, but it became fairly clear that for most people, the way to carry on the music was, the language was really to do it in the home. That there wouldn't really be school opportunities, but much more in the way of home opportunities. And so a lot of the program has evolved to be about families. And in fact, we have a family language program now that is part of the Master Apprentice program. So it's whenever you've got a team, the way the Master Apprentice works is you have a team of a speaker, an elder speaker, and a young person who's trying to learn the language. And if the younger speaker, especially the younger learner, is a parent, then the children are brought in right away into that program. And really focusing on families has been, you know, all along we've sort of felt, well, if you've got kids, you've got to pass it along to your kids. But focusing on the family as being the core of language revitalization in California is more recent. And, you know, I just wanted to mention there's another book, Mary, that I edited called Bringing Our Languages Home. And if you haven't seen that book, that has every chapter is by the members of a family who are using their endangered language at home. And it's mostly North American languages, but there's also Maori and Hawaiian and a few other places, that one Australian language. So just if you don't know much about the Master Apprentice program, I wanted to just show you the basics of it. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let me get up the thing I want. Okay, so most of the training for the young adults and for the elders who are trying to transmit the language to the young adult is based on these 10 points. And I'll be getting in a few minutes to a variation on that we're using right now during COVID. But so it's a set of principles. So one of them is to stay in your language. So the master and apprentice, we ask the master and apprentice to essentially live their lives together. And how many hours a week that can be will vary from person to person, but some of the most successful ones move in with the speaker, and so they can spend most of their waking hours in the language. And we also developed this notion of immersion sets that in this situation of one-on-one, where you have, first of all, you have a speaker who's not a teacher specifically. In fact, sometimes things work better if they aren't teachers, but who knows the language really fluently. And you have a learner who's very dedicated. And so at first, it's really difficult for them to stay in the language. And so what we train people at the beginning is to figure out what you're going to do. Let's say that you're going to learn how to, okay, COVID, you're going to learn how to wash your hands and talk about washing your hands in the language. So you can plan that in English. You can say, okay, let's do the washing hands and let's go to the bathroom, and what you'll tell me, as you, the speaker, can tell me is what I'm doing when I pick up the soap and what I'm doing when I turn on the water, and just tell me what I'm doing and I'll listen to it. And then when we've finished, I'll try to say I am doing it, so I'll learn the I part or whatever. So you're saying, all right, that's the plan. And now what we're going to do is, for the entire time I'm washing hands, and we'll do it over and over, is that we won't use any English. So that's what an immersion set is. And then afterwards you can talk about how it worked. And then they also learn how to use gestures and actions and pictures, anything that they can do to stay in the language. And one of the real strong efforts has to be made to get the speaker to use the language as much as possible. So at first, again, the apprentice would like to listen. And so how is the apprentice going to get the speaker to say more? Maybe through stories or through activities that involve language. We love, for example, giving them wordless books where the story is all in the pictures, and just having the speaker tell the story with the pictures, and the apprentice will listen and maybe ask questions, but it's a very comfortable kind of exercise, because the speaker knows that the listener is going to be able to tell what's going on because of the pictures, so he can relax about talking a lot when he knows, even if the apprentice doesn't know the language. And then the apprentice will be able to get what's going on. And the other thing, we borrowed this term language hunter from the where are your keys method, that the apprentice needs to go for the language, needs to get that language, to hunt for the language. And so one of the main things that the apprentice has to learn right away is how to ask for the language in the language. So ask things like, what is this in your language? Or what are you doing? Or what am I doing? Maybe you're picking up a cup, or you're pouring coffee, and you can ask, what am I doing? So that you're getting the language from the speaker. And we feel that it's best to learn through activities. And so this is part of the idea of learning through living your lives together, that you can do whatever you'd be doing anyway. If you need to wash clothes that day, then you wash clothes together in the language. And if you can cook in the language, eat in the language, make coffee, go shopping, take walks, do the gardening together, whatever it is that you might be doing anyway, you do in the language. And I don't have to go through all of these, but we just try to talk about how people learn grammar not necessarily by being taught grammar, but simply by learning phrases and words and using it, and the grammar kind of comes naturally the way it does with a child learning his first language. We also try to make sure that the speaker learn how to correct without criticizing as much as possible. We talk about that a lot, and that it really should be fun. So in all of this is based on oral conversation. So that's the focus, is learning how to converse together orally. But I'm going to stop the share. But then COVID hit, and if people don't live together or right near each other, all of a sudden our master apprentice teams can't work together anymore. And so we had to cancel a whole lot of things. The ICLs did, the advocates, and but we decided that what we really had to do was to use Zoom and get people together that way. And so we've been having bi-weekly meetings, and that involve training and reporting and question answer periods, and we've realized, again, I praised Zoom at the beginning. We realized that we've been able to give our teams a lot more support now than we ever have before, because our trainings were always, we have teams from all over California, which is a very large state. And so finding times when we can get everyone together in one place, and they always will, many of them would have to travel for hundreds of miles. And then we have to find a venue for it in a hotel. We try to do it in different parts of the state each time. And we've, for many years now, we've had a hard time getting more than 2 trainings a year, say one in Southern California and one in Northern California. But now we can be with them every other week with no problem. So it's actually been a pleasure. It's been helping the program a lot. And there's a great many of our teams are families who where the learner is a parent of young kids, and so everything is being sort of turned toward using the family in the home anyway. So we've also been introducing a new method during COVID that that changes in a way how the learning works. And it's a method that was developed by Zalmai Zaire. He's a very interesting person. Lushootseed is his language, and but he himself is half Afghanistani and half Sioux. But his mother married a Lushootseed man when he was about 11, and so Zeke learned Lushootseed very fluently, and is now a Lushootseed teacher, and he's been teaching remotely for years. And so he has this idea of a language nest as being a place in the home that could evolve to be the entire house, but he says, let's start with one room at a time, where you learn enough to be able to always use your language in that space. So he actually gave a multilingual training early in the summer, and used the bathroom as the place that would become the language nest in the home. And so you wash your hands. So there's various domains in the bathroom, right? There's washing hands as one domain. Taking a shower is another domain. Drying off is one domain. Peeing is one domain. There's cleaning the bathroom. So cleaning the floor is a domain, and cleaning the toilet is a domain. And it just goes on and on, that there's maybe 20, 30, 40 domains, depending on how you break them up. And the way he teaches is that the speaker will help the learner actually write down these phrases for each domain. And then the learner will post the phrases in the location where the activity takes place. And the learner has to say those phrases every time he's doing the activity. So the phrases for washing hands would be, again, I turn on the water, I wet my hands, I pick up the soap, I start rubbing my hands together. Now I rinse my hands, turn off the water, put the soap down, or whatever. And now my hands are clean. And so this is actually a form of self-narration, is what he's teaching, that people will just narrate what they're doing, so that, again, you don't necessarily have to have a conversation partner present. You can use your language. He says you should learn to use your language at least an hour a day when you're home, whether or not you have a partner to talk to. And so self-narration becomes a big part of language use. And he's also added conversation as another kind of domain from self-narration. And the conversation is something, again, he's teaching beginners. And so the beginners learn a question and answer sequence, like, where did you go yesterday? And the answer could be, I went to the store, I went to school, I went to the garden, and so on. Or who did you see? I saw Joe, I saw Mary, I saw my father, I saw a friend. And so these are not exactly natural conversation, but again, just ways to bring in more and more language that you can use if you, in this case, if you have a partner. Now, one reason that we developed this is that the Master Apprentice program, or developed the use of it with our teams, is that it brings in some things that we didn't do before. And one of them is writing. That we did not have reading and writing to be part of language learning in the Master Apprentice program. And there were at least two major reasons for this. One of them is that most of the languages did not have official writing systems. And so how to write becomes a really big problem. And we would hear people saying back at the beginning, they'd be saying things like, well, how can we possibly learn our language when we don't even have a writing system? And we'd have to say, but you learn a language orally. You learn it by hearing it and by speaking it. And we tended to find that if you try to write everything down that you're learning, it becomes, you don't do immersion anymore. You're not immersed in the language. You're not hearing the language enough or using the language enough. So we just didn't use writing. But nowadays, I think most of the tribes do have writing systems that at least the apprentice knows. Some of them still don't, but so they can use writing to just put down these phrases that they have to learn through long repetition. I'm still not sure I totally agree with it, with the use of it, because getting it off the page and into your head is still the big issue if you're going to use writing. But so we're experimenting with that. And the other thing that I think Zeke's method does help with is that when we designed the Master Apprentice program, we said, okay, you're going to use these principles, but you can apply them to anything you want. So it depends what you want to learn. So you want to learn how to say it in your daily life. So choose those domains and do that. But we don't give them much structure. And so for some teams, it's great because they can provide their own structure. But for other teams, it's not so good because they feel like, oh, I want to learn the whole language, and how can I even begin? So, and so this method is providing structure for those teams that need a little bit more guidance than just say, do anything you want with these principles. So we're kind of doing both. We have some new teams that are just starting. And so we have these 2-hour sessions every other week, and 1 hour is devoted to the Zahir method, Zeke's method, and the other hour is devoted to training the more standard Master Apprentice approach. And although we haven't been able to give our new teams the 2-day super training, we're giving them a little bit each every 2 weeks, and it seems to be working very well. So maybe just to see, I'm not sure with the time here, but just to give you a brief look at a couple of families. We have a couple of 3-generation families that are especially doing well, where they have an elder who's near them and who can be a big part of the language learning, and we have parents who are working with their kids very intensively, and one of them is doing homeschooling. She has 4 kids now, and they have the oldest one is maybe 6th grade, but it's completely homeschooling so that she can use the language throughout the day with them, with their learning. And those kids are becoming very strong language activists already. And then another family that has a teenager that learned the language a little bit when he was a kid, and the father was an apprentice in the Master Apprentice program. Then the speaker died, and that they were working with, and it was his aunt. And somehow the language got so tied up with the relationship to the speaker that when the speaker died, it was like their language died. They were so sad they just couldn't even speak the language anymore because their aunt was so important to them. And so for some years they just didn't use the language, but now they've come back with the father and the teenage son now as a Master Apprentice team. And so we have the father has been teaching in the schools, and knows the language quite well from his master apprentice days as an apprentice, and we think that this family is sort of recovering from the trauma and starting to use the language again. So I think my half hour is up, and I better turn it over to Joey.
Miigwech, Leanne. If you want to hold your questions or put them in the chat, we're going to first go to Joey before we open it up for discussion. Miigwech so much. And thank you, Joey, for waiting patiently. Ginatam.
Oh, waiwanan poso maoni wiak pakachika hene ayawi and ay homas homat no mane ne taskoni kane in pamatasim hayach pamatasit. Yope hios ne waiwane tokasim hakom kitchkiwak catchka kenomuk. I Nancy Jones, okay ma wigonebik. Doreen ha mashik ma kitchkiwak yope hios kespiak. So patch ka kiki timina he hiosni. In it hayach be martisim and it case kakenuman and a omatnumane waitnessin. So yope ta machinini hey homas sachikawi kamako netano kim and it neta satnasewan homatnumane awewan. Ta yope hios manowichni and kata kakiki tim. And a kako quest safety we a hios so pemata simakut and a mache da waitness and it's waichikatak waitness in wasat language nest a wahin a com kake no mo ikok. So yope ta manowich mokomane waitness in so kakenam maoni wiak. Buju, Poso, Hanin, hello everybody. It's good to see all of you. I have the fondest memory of working with Nancy some years back. We did a storytelling event. Buju, it's so good to see you. We were down in Madison and oh my God, I just fell in love with her. She was telling us a trapping story. She was going across the river with her four-wheeler and oh man, I always remember some of her tales that she would tell us about, and so I'm just so honored to have you part of this discussion here, and it's so wonderful to see you doing well. My current role here with my tribe is I've been sitting as the director of our tribe's language and culture department for some years now, and like anything else, it's a bit of a learning curve. So several years later, and surrounding myself with some really good people, my younger brother being one of them. We've set out to change the dynamic of our language here, how it was being taught, how it was getting out to the community, how it was being into the schools. When I keep saying we, I mean my older sister and my younger brother, Pitapanuki and Moshakwet. For quite a few years, we were all teachers in our local schools here. Pitapanuki, she taught kindergarten through 4th and some of 5th. I taught middle school, some of 5th grade, all the way through 8th grade. And Moshakwet, he taught high school. And so several years into our teaching profession, we came to the harsh reality that through the bilingual program, we were never, no matter how hard we worked, no matter how much effort we put into it, we were never going to create, raise an advanced speaker of our children. And we were seeing this after 10 years. And so, we, for several years, being younger people, we wanted something different. We wanted something more. We wanted it to be unique to who we are as woodland people. And so we really started pushing very gently, because everybody that held all these positions that were making the decisions were obviously older us. They weren't elder age, but they were older than us. And so we wanted to be as respectful and as careful as we could as we were moving forward and letting them know that we needed to change. We needed to do this differently. And well, unfortunately, some of the things weren't, it was like poking a beehive with a stick at first. Oh my God, boy, did we get stung up, I tell you. But we persisted. We kept moving forward. We kept gently encouraging change. And every time it was the same result. We kind of kept hitting that wall, and we'd hit the wall and we'd hit the wall. Well, you bang your head enough times on a wall, it kind of starts to hurt a little bit after a while. So what we did was we added a little bit extra stress to our life, and we all started applying for different seats and boards and commissions. And all three of us ended up on the Language and Culture Commission, which is a very prestigious board within our tribal structure that oversees specifically language and education, culture, and traditions being taught in the school. So finally, we were gaining a little bit of momentum, and our voices were finally being heard in the community and at the leadership level. So we continued to move things as much as we could. And, you know, one day it just struck us as, why are we trying to play this political game, and why are we not just doing what we want to do? So that's what we did. We just stopped playing the political game with our tribal leaders, and we just started doing what we knew in our heart to be the right thing to do. And that was teaching language outside of the school. We started pushing for the Language Nest, for the Immersion program. And it was difficult. It still was very difficult, because our tribal leaders were under the assumption that there were several Menominee first language speakers yet, and there wasn't. We knew at that time we were down to about 15 first language fluent speakers of our tribe. And so it's like that old story you hear, you're screaming in the background and trying to get people's attention, and they're just not paying attention to you. And so over the years, you know, we started losing more and more and more elders. And in 2015, we had lost the passing of our last fully functional, fluent male speaker, Mr. Tamau Katnup, who used to be. And up to that point, he had done a lot of speaking in the community, doing prayers and invocations and helping with a lot of different things. So when he passed, it just sent a shockwave through the tribe, especially our tribal leadership. And so at that point, a few days after we had sent him on his journey, we were approached by our tribal leadership. And, you know, they said, well, if you boys can come up with a solid language program, we will help secure the funding for you boys to see this through. So we did. We brought several of our partners to the table. We went out, we networked with Wadukadading, we went down to the Big Island, Hilo. We went up to Bethel to see the dual language immersion up in Alaska. And we reached out, we started networking with anybody and everybody that would, you know, that would talk with us. And as that summer rolled on, the tribe later that fall in 2015 passed our proposal, accepted it, and they gave us some funding. So January 2nd, 2016, we kicked off the Menominee Language Immersion Program. And, you know, it sounds really cool. Yeah, we're going to do a language nest, all right. But holy jumping Jiminy Crickets, well, you don't think of all the stuff in the background that you need to set into place. You know, all these different things that need to happen. And at that time, we had dwindled way down. We were like down to our last 4 speakers, our elders. And of those 4, only one of them would continually come in to help us. And so there were basically the 3 of us that were pretty functional in our speaking during that time. And we were like, holy man, you know, how are we going to administrate this program, achieve a charter school, a language nest? You know, that's just such a mountain for 3 people. So we're like, all right, well, what we're going to do is we're going to build capacity first. We need to build capacity with some teachers. So that's what we set out to do. We started bringing the teachers in, which was really cool, that our tribe took this really big step, because we're kind of a pitiful tribe in terms of money-wise. We have a casino, but all of our money goes into the infrastructure of our tribe. We don't like make enough money to do per caps and stuff. So the tribe allowed us to hire 10 enrolled tribal members, full benefits for a 14-month training program at an awesome wage. And so that's what we did. We started building capacity for our language nest. Now, of course, it took us 2 years, just speaking with other people that were doing this type of work, other language warriors across this Turtle Island. You know, we were finding out really quick in the birth of this program that if we're starting with 10 tribal members to train them and educate them, statistically speaking, and just being real about it, we're going to end up with maybe 40 or 50% to successfully finish this program. And that was pretty heartbreaking, because we were putting our heart and our soul, and we were literally doing everything and anything to keep every employee we had during that first round. But unfortunately, life happens, people's directions change, and but life's got to go on. So we finished that first year, that first 14 months, with 4 people out of 10. And thank God, one of those people went to the University of Madison, and they've just recently came back in the last year, and they have their bachelor's so far in linguistics, and he's going to continue on for his master's. The other 3 ladies, they stuck it out. And so we started another group. This time we brought in 6. 10 was pretty ambitious for a couple of young guys that didn't know anything about administrative and HR stuff. And oh my God, we were just swimming in so many things that first year. But thank God we made it. We still had our long hair when we got done with that first 14 months. And so we started a new group. Now, the initial plan that the tribe had put into the proposal was after year 1, we would start a charter school. Well, you just don't start a charter school in 14 months. Oh my God. And of course, like I mentioned before, we didn't really have a lot of funding, and we didn't have a place to house the nest at that time, the charter school. So we realized that charter school is maybe 5, 7, 8 years down the road. That's a little bit beyond our short-term planning. And as luck would have it, I guess most people would say luck, but one thing we've always done, and I'm sure a lot of you have done this as well, is we always offer our netnamo, our sama. We've found that as we go through each day, and of course there's the wonderful times you're cruising down in the canoe on the river, and the water's nice and calm, the wild rice is everywhere, and the ducks are flying. But then there's other days where, holy man, you're going down that rapids at 100 miles an hour, and you're putting holes in your canoe, and boy, oh boy. So anyway, we realized that a charter school was more of a long-range goal off. So as the creator put this one guy in our path, that he was the director of our early childhood services. And just at a chance meeting, my younger brother was like, hey, you want to come over and have a meeting with us? We're talking about what to do with our immersion teachers, and we're really looking at doing something with birth to maybe 5 years of age. And so from that one chance meeting, within 7 months, we opened up our very first Menominee language immersion classroom at daycare. Now, of course, there were several factors we looked at. We knew a lot of our partners and our colleagues and people in our network were starting more with the 3 and 4 year olds as you start getting into Head Start and pre-K and kindergarten. And initially, that's what we were thinking too. But we stumbled across a TED Talk, and the lady's name was Nadia Ramirez. And she was talking about critical brain growth in babies, specifically babies. And more importantly, we have a teaching, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. We have a teaching about the soft spot on a baby's head. You know, and roughly it's what, 18 to 24 months or so. And one of our big teachings for parents as they're raising their children through those years is during that short window is the critical time where you should be instilling all of that good, all that love, all that compassion, speaking to your child. You know, and I mean, it just snowballs into why we have the cradle boards and why you prop your baby up and why you're busy. Anyway, we decided to go with birth to 5 year olds. In our very first classroom, our language nest, we wanted to specifically target birth to 8 months, about that 6-8 month range. Well, again, holy smokes, it sounds great, right? It sounds, hey, we're going to have babies. Awesome, wonderful. Well, until you actually get in the classroom, you don't realize you're changing shitty diapers about every half hour, and you're feeding babies, and they're crying and they're burping, and you're crawling around on the floor with 5, 6, 7, 8 babies laying down. Oh my God, it was just, wow, it was an eye-opener. So we started that inaugural group on September 4th, 2017. We actually got our language nest, our very first room, up and running. We had 3 teachers that had made it through the initial program. We had a new group that was going through the program. And it's really crazy. One of the ladies that made it, she was a teacher, so she kind of knew what to expect a little bit. And she's a grandma and a mom. So she really knew. One of them was actually a lawyer. So she left her lawyer job to come and be a part of the program. And she's a mom too, she knew. And then the other one was in administration at our casino. So these ladies left prominent jobs to come and change shitty asses basically for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And holy scissors, boy, oh boy, I tell you, we sure learned a lot. You know, there were days where Ron and I would have to go over and be in the room to help. You know, it's kind of like the domino effect. When you get one baby that cries, holy smokes, then 2 babies, then 3 babies, then 5, then you got all 8 babies crying. You're like, oh my God, what are we doing? So after those first 6 months, things started to mellow out a little bit. And all of a sudden the clouds cleared and the sun starts shining again. And oh man, it was just this beautiful journey. So of course, things started getting smooth, and you think we would be happy with that. No, hey, let's add another classroom. So we did. We added another classroom in 2018. In 2019, we added 2 more classrooms. We added a dual language immersion room in our daycare system, half English, half Menominee, and we added another full immersion room. And just this past August, I think it was August 24th, we opened up our Head Start room in full immersion, which is the first 8 inaugural babies that we took in, the very first babies. And oh my God, it's been this beautiful, amazing ride that we've been on. And we are now on our 4th trainee program. Just that first one, we had 10 tribal members the first go around in 2016. but every one we've had since then, we've lowered the numbers down to 6. And we've had a much higher success rate being able to help them more one-on-one with their language learning. So what we do is we train them for 14 months here in the program. And once they have a solid foundation of understanding how our language works, they're able to, we can sit in the morning and we can talk for at least an hour. We have our coffee and our visiting time in the morning with them. After 14 months, we certify them, they receive their license. Then we ship them over to the daycare and they take their place in one of the classrooms that we have. And that's where the real learning happens, right? We all know that once you have somewhat of a foundation, once you slide into an immersion atmosphere, oh boy, then your learning really starts to excel at that point. And we've seen exactly that happen. And we say Chimigwech to Wadukadaading. They've been so helpful. There were so many days where, oh my God, we just couldn't smudge any harder and any more, and we would call up Wadukadaading, and and they would say, oh yeah, we went through that last week, and so they would give us the old pat on the back and the pep talk and kind of shove us back off the dock and go get them boys, you got her kind of talk. And but so that's where we are. We've learned so much so far up to this point. We're still learning, being younger members of our tribe. Our community, our tribal membership has put so much faith, so much trust in what we are doing. We have a waiting list, just, oh my God, just 10 stacks deep at our immersion room. We just can't take in all of the babies. We don't have the classroom space. We don't have the classrooms, and we just can't expand fast enough. So we're still expanding. Our short-term goal at this point was to have the birth to 5-year-old be a solid program. Now it's taken us 5 years. We're entering into our 5th year, and we are talking with our local schools. They have committed to partnering up with us to take that next step for that charter school. The Language Nest, they want to call it a charter school, but it's basically going to be the next step in the Language Nest for us. Now, that's all good, but for our first 2 years of our programming, we were so stressed out, always trying to engage the parents, getting the parents to come do this, getting the parents to come do that. One of the issues we ran into was, and I'm sure a lot of you are the same way, a lot of your parents work, the jobs, they come home in the evening, they got to cook supper, clean up the kids, do laundry, and cut the grass, and get the firewood in the house, and blah, 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 and so on and so on. We could not, because of the funding source, we could not mandate or require our immersion parents to be a part of the program. We could just invite them. All we could do was invite them and hope they would come. So again, talking to a couple of our colleagues during the first couple of years, and they said, you know what, you boys, you guys are stressing a little bit too much on the parent involvement. He said, you're always going to get some of the parents that'll do everything and anything. Whatever you put on, these parents will show up. She said, then you're going to have the other parents where it's cool to have your kids in the immersion program, but they don't want to put all the hard work into it. And that's exactly what we were seeing. And so he said, the best thing you can do at this point, if you can't mandate your parents to be there in any shape, fashion, or form, is the parents that want to be there, you need to give them as much love and as much care as you're giving to their children. If they're wanting to pour their heart into learning along with their children, you need to make sure that you are providing information, language learning, language development, for those parents as much as possible. And so that's when we kind of shifted gears a little bit. And we were like, well, that does make a lot of sense, because we're beating our head against the wall trying to get all the parents to show up. And we had about 8 of them that were consistently being there at everything, anything we did. Man, they were there with bells on. So what we're, and I agree with what you said, Leanne, you're absolutely correct. Because what we found was, when the pandemic started, for us, we started teleworking back in March, the second week in March here in Menominee, and everything shut down. And we didn't want to lose what we had built with our babies. We wanted to make sure they were still getting daily language. We wanted to keep that connection with our parents, with our trainee program. And what we found was Zoom actually gets just about 90% of our parents involved in the program. And I'm just like, poof, I'm like, well, who would have thunk? Dang. So we've been having amazing results with this Zoom video. We use Zoom, we use Messenger, we share a lot of documents on Dropbox and Google Docs, and there's just so many ways today. The sky is the limit on how you want to electronically share material with people. But we have found this, this type of venue here to be so super effective with being engaged with our immersion teachers, our bilingual teachers, our immersion babies, and anybody else in the community that's interested and wants to be a part and wants to learn. So we wanted, it's no big surprise, this whole Western education thing is such a, sit up straight and put your feet on the floor and look straight ahead in the classroom. And we were like, boo, we don't want to do any of that. So that's why we took the Language Nest approach. Is I love going to my grandma's and my aunt's house. I mean, it's such a beautiful, inviting atmosphere. It's a relaxing atmosphere. Go in, sit around on the couch, eat a sandwich, talk a little bit, and have a cup of iced tea. So that's what we wanted for our kids. We wanted our children to be relaxed. We wanted them to feel at home, like they were visiting Uncle Joe's house or Uncle Ronco's house. And now the kids are getting old enough. It's getting a little easier for us now to start, once we're all back to work, is being able to get them out to do the ricing, do the sugar camp, do the snowshoes, set the snares, help with the garden. We've been doing a garden here at our office for the last 3 years. And the babies just love it, just getting their hands dirty and eating the dirt. And no, I'm just kidding. But the babies love it though. They just, they come in, they work the dirt with their hands. And like you were saying, picking a space in your house and assigning that as the language nest, so to say, that little gardening we do with the raised beds, we are able to do so much with daily language, talking about plants, talking about seeds, talking about the sun, talking about the animals, the worms, the bugs. All of those things are incorporated into that, I guess you would say, that little piece that we do, and that's just the gardening. So I know there's so much there. I talk to my grandchildren all the time when they come up. We do the language nest setting at my house. But what I've told them is everywhere in Papa's yard is our language nest. So everywhere we go, we do the gardening. At our house, we have a huge garden. Even when we're by the dogs that I have are Anamok, that's a language setting. I talk to my grandkids what the dogs are doing, what their names are, what color they are, what they eat, how old they are. So we really push those types of things with all of our parents and our community members on the language nest for their home. We do provide material for them. A lot of parents always ask, well, can I get that in a handout? Can I get that in writing? And we're a little hesitant. We kind of give them a hard time a little bit. You know, we're like, language doesn't live on that paper. Language lives when it comes out of your mouth and it enters my ears. That's how language is living, and it's alive, and it's a part of us. It's who we are. If I send you a paper with all of these things, then all you're going to do is look at it, put it in your folder, and it's going to sit there. So we're kind of critical about that. We do it, but we really give them a hard time about it first before we do it. As I mentioned, our next step, because that first group of babies, now they're getting 4 years old now. They're between 4 and 4.5 years old now. And we are really pushing really hard to make sure we have that charter school language nest set up into next year as we enter into 21-22 school year. Because we want to have a place for them to grow. Our long range goal is to, now that we've created the short range, which is the birth to 5 years old, now we want to ensure that our children at least have this opportunity up to 5th grade. So kindergarten up to 5th grade. That's going to be our next endeavor that we're working diligently on right now. I know I kind of rambled on a little bit and kind of jumped around, but it's always kind of good to hear some of, you know, kind of, you'd be surprised how many people are probably like, oh, we went through that. Oh man, that's exactly what happened to us. You know, it really makes people feel like, oh, somebody else went through that too. Oh man, my heart goes out to you. And, you know, so it just helps strengthen your network sometimes if you can share some of the not so happy times, and, you know, just help people if you can share something so they don't have to recreate something and go through all of that again. It just helps a little bit. So waiwanan katana ni mua hene case no tuian mashikni ehios and katakikitim case benuia kakenam manowich kako. So I thank you all for listening to me speak for a little bit. And I know we're going to be on for a while yet, so looking forward to answering questions and being a part of discussion here. Aho.
Right. All right. Well, we're back. We're back, and it's our first question for our speakers. Babies, the teaching is babies don't look in the mirror.
Being grown up is overrated.
The teaching is don't look in the mirror until you're 1, and being grown up is overrated.
You know, and Doug.
So we have some questions in the chat, but we'll start with that one. Babies on Zoom. Does Leanne or Joey, you want to respond to that?
Well, that'll be Joey.
So what we've done is it's very tricky to keep your babies engaged on Zoom. So what our immersion teachers have done is they've actually created short 5-minute video clips, multiple short 5-minute video clips. And in general, kids our children are pretty engaged when it comes to watching a cartoon, playing video games on their phone. A real big thing I see around is a lot of kids, parents here, I don't know about everywhere else, a lot of parents will let their children, what is it called? It's the video thing, YouTube. I see a lot of parents allow their kids to be on YouTube. And we've done something very, very similar to that. We've tried to use as many props as we can to make it fun and interesting for the kids. The kids will, our children, they will be engaged and do some of the things that's going on Zoom, but it doesn't take them too long to get very uninterested and a little bit rambunctious when mom and dad are trying to learn along with them. So to try and help mom and dad to be more engaged is, like I said, our immersion teachers have created a bunch of these little short video clips. I guess little acting out, little cartoons, little skits and things like that, which really helps. So no, we have not found the magic being to keep our little babies engaged on Zoom. We're just doing what we can to try and help with the short videos and stuff.
Stay.
All right. Well, so we have different teachings, and we have the idea of using videos and playing on Zoom without the kids themselves being on Zoom.
You know, one other thing that we've done was about 3 years ago, we embarked on virtual reality and augmented reality. We've started creating some video games. And you can see in the background, I have some of our headsets that just came in there. We use the Oculus headsets, and we partnered up with some outside contractors. And they were meeting with us every week, but with the pandemic, I meet with them every other week now. And they've created, of course, you can do so much with VR nowadays. It's just amazing the things you can do with it. But of course, it all depends on the money you have to dump into the graphics and everything that goes into it. So our first few that we've created were pretty simple. You kind of get into the world, and the kids are really engaged with that. They love that. They put the headsets on. But I must say, that's your first obstacle, is just getting the kids to put the headset on and to leave it on. Because, oh my God, they want to take it off. They want to throw it and roll it. They think they can sit on it. And oh my God.
They're so tight.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are finding now that our kids are growing up a little bit, and they're at that 4-year-old mark, and they've been accustomed to the headsets now. They are keeping them on longer, and they're not playing with them. They know what they're for. I guess there was that little bit of a learning period for them to realize what it was. But they love that. Oh my God, they love the games. Well, they're on an educational level, they're called experiences, but we all call them games. So that might be something for some of you as well, is to venture in some of that VR space, because there's so much you can do. We found things on Cree, and they're doing some stuff over there. Down in the Southwest, they're doing a lot of stuff with VR, and more tribes are now. So the information's out there, and you know, it's just another tool basically to put in your belt, you know, to help.
Oh, so we have a stack of questions. I'm going to just go through them. The first one is from Wase. It says, for Joey, how do you determine content topics you cover with your adult learners? Who determines, how do you determine the content of those, what you're going to use in the nest, what to do in the nest?
So in the nest for our babies, I'll speak on that a little bit first. With the babies, it's just every day, just like we're talking here today. And of course, what we're doing is we're incorporating Montessori learning methodology into our language nest. And we like the Montessori because it comes with like a lot of homemade things. It looks like they're homemade, little wood blocks and different things like that. And there's so much you can do with it. So we're incorporating that, and it helps to have those couple little objects for the kids to play with while we're doing maybe a counting, a sequencing, color schemes. Because I know, just like our language, what I'm sure many of you use, when we speak of colors, there's living colors and non-living, the animacy and inanimacy, and which is a huge thing for us in our language, are the transitive animate verbs and transitive inanimate verbs. And so it's not, the cool thing with the kids is you just need to speak it and they're picking up the patterns. We're seeing that with our 4-year-olds is they just know it. They're just learning it and they're knowing it. Now, the flip side of that coin is with our parents. It's a little more difficult with our parents. I know Ojibwe is just as grammatically structured as ours is, and a lot of the parents have a difficult time understanding. They might hear us say Nemachamenemau, I remember him, her, versus Nemachamenetan, oh, I remember that, a non-living thing, like something that happened. And then so they get confused. They're like, well, didn't you use this ending? And how come it sounded different? So with the parents, we take a little bit of a different approach. They don't have it naturally in them to understand the grammatical changes, the linguistic patterns that are happening. So we start at a very basic level with the parents. And one of the tools we use is TPR, total physical response. I'm sure many of you have heard of that. Now, it's not a cure-all, but what it does is it brings up your learner that's coming into the program fresh, not knowing very much at all. It gives them a huge usable vocabulary in a short amount of time. We're finding in about a 4-week period, we can get our learners from 0 up to about 280, give or take 280 words. And within that realm, they can talk about past, present, future, of course, on a very simplified scale. They can't go into the Gettysburg Address or anything, but they can answer very, very simple questions. They can ask very, very simple questions. And then from that point, once we build that platform, then we can start branching out into different areas, more specifically the verb areas for us. That's what we've found the parents struggle the most with. So my younger brother, Mo Shakwit, he's actually our instructor. And so he's meticulously created and tried many different things. And what he does today in the classroom for the parents and for the community, and on the newest adventure he's on, Menominee U, is he starts them all right from that platform. With the TPR method. And then once they have that platform, then he can branch out to family members, colors, animals, verbs, you know, all the different topics that are around us.
Go ahead, Wase. Did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So like, I'm really interested in how you determine what content you're covering with your new teachers. That 14-month teacher training is really interesting to me, just because I think that getting people from where they're starting, which I'm taking as beginning, to classroom ready in 14 months amazes me. But like, I just wonder, like, determining content, determining topics, determining what kind of language skills you want them to have during that time just blows my mind. So I just wish you would talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, like I said, the first step we take, we don't care if someone's had 5 years of language, 10 years of language, or no years of language. When they enter our program, everybody starts from the ground level. So what we've found is someone that comes in with 10 years of language experience, I guess we've had multiple people in our tribe try to teach language over the last 20 years since our elders started taking their journey home. And unfortunately, some of our tribal members had a little difficulty on how to get that content across to them. So what we found is there's a lot of misconceptions, some mispronunciations. So everybody starts from ground zero. And the first thing we do, like I mentioned, we spend that first 4 weeks building their TPR content. Now, how we've determined that is we use high frequency words, high frequency vocabulary. Things that we do every day. I sit every day, I stand, I walk, I eat. You know, even in the realm of going to the bathroom, we've become so damn sensitive nowadays. We can't even say we're taking a shit. We have to say, oh, I got to go to the bathroom and take a number 2. I never heard my elders talk like that in my community. So we're kind of flipping that on its head. You know, if you got to go number 1, well, nikatuwe sakasim, I'm going to go pee, I'm going to go urinate. Nikatuwe mesem, I'm going to go take a number 2, I got to poop. You know, so all of those different things, we're trying to get more away from the Western philosophy of teaching and reinstilling our indigenous philosophy of teaching. So for us, and I'm sure what many of you as well, this one-on-one interaction is so amazing. This is how we're supposed to be communicating with each other. And so that's how we've determined what high frequency words are. And plus we've done a lot of research as well. And we found there was a guy that did a Ojibwe series called Pimsleur. We've listened to that. We've done some work with that. We found another research that there's actually, if you can learn, 12 to 1400 words in any language, you can basically understand any kind of topic that's being discussed. So we looked at all this different research. We looked at very closely, what do we do in a day? How do we speak? What do we talk about? The tenses, the past, the present, the future. So we build all of that very rapidly in a command form over that first 4 weeks. And it's just like the methodology is just like teaching babies. When a baby comes, you know, it's first, oh, pianin, pianin. You know, you use your gestures, come here, and you know, like boy, I don't know, like eat. Oh, meet your sinan. You know, everything's kind of like using the hand gestures, kind of like what Leanne was saying earlier. So once we've gone through that and we've kind of plateaued out, because just like any other methodology, after a few weeks, it's just like, oh, TPR again, come on, really? So you really have to watch your learners. Sometimes we went up to 6 weeks, depending on the engagement and the excitement and the level of activity we're getting feedback from. But the quickest we've ever done it is 4 weeks. So once we've plateaued at that point, then all of a sudden, we rewind a little bit and we, you know, I'll use the word for sit. We tell them, you know, what is a pain on? What does that mean? We'll tell them, and oh, that means sit. All right. So we don't go around every day telling everybody to sit and using command form for myself that, well, I told myself to sit. So we start teaching them how to manipulate one verb category at a time, using those high frequency words. So it's nothing new. It's everything they've learned in an imperative form. Now they're backing it up. They're familiar with the sounds. They're familiar with the structure. And we're showing them all of a sudden a pain on one command form turns into netapim, kitapim, apeo, apeowuk, netapim. And now, so all of a sudden that one word turns into 11 different ways to express one word. So now that takes some months to do. Our language, just like many of you, is very complex. It can get a bit complicated at times. So we take little chunks at a time, just enough where they can digest it. So it takes us months, about 6 months actually, to get through, because we have 4 verb categories. So, you know, a certain amount of weeks, my younger brother will teach each of those. Now, once we've gone through all of that, now they have this massive understanding and they're using it. As all of this is going on, we force them to speak. We force them to make mistakes. But we don't sit there and, oh, you said that wrong. You should have said it this way. You know, we try to be like my grandma was to me. You know, I might have said something and say, oh, naha whiskey, what, that's good. you know, patch kiki tena no ohna ne hiom, you know, then she would say, that's good, but you could probably say it like this, would be a little more proper. So we try to interject some of that more support stuff with them. Once we kind of go through all that, now we're rounding about the 10-month mark, maybe give or take or so, between 9 and 10 months. Now we start pushing more exercises. We'll do a lot of things like one day we might give them a sheet and they have to tell us imagine you were back during the time of our ancestors. What would be the one thing that you feel you would be the best at? Hunting, fishing, trapping, building canoes, making nets. And then they have to go into this big elaborate story all in the language. So we really start pushing a lot of off the wall exercises. We might, one of the things we do is we do a scavenger hunt. Everybody has to pick one place on our reservation, one of our villages, somewhere in our forest, and they have to tell us how to get there all in the language, and we have to go there and find that spot. So, I mean, a lot of fun things. You got to keep it fun, but you have to challenge them. You have to force them to use the language. So those last exercises kind of round out their ability, and for them, for the learner, they're like, holy crap, I didn't know I could do that. I had no idea I had that knowledge. And so it's just really boosting them up, supporting them, giving them more filler here and there, helping them to use the proper verb. You know, like, and again, our language, we have multiple ways to say the same thing, but each thing is more specific to one than the other. And so they'll learn one way, and they might use that way throughout different circumstances. And then that's the perfect time for us to, you know, we also use this word, which more specifically, so it gives you that time to work with them one-on-one and just really support them and boost them. Does that answer your question? Does that help? Okay.
Okay. Leanne had a related question, and I just want to, did he cover that? Okay. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, just to say that for the Master Apprentice program, we really depend on TPR a great deal, and we teach that to the team to use, especially at first, like you were saying, and it's very helpful.
Great. All right. So the next question is and this is for Leanne, do you find that adults truly capture language without actually having grammar instruction? Or do you find it's beneficial for adults to have some kind of coursework to assist with the Master Apprentice?
We're working with so many languages at once. You know, that so all our trainings are very multilingual, and all our teams are from the languages aren't even related to each other. Most of them are really different from each other. So each language has to deal with what it has available, and unfortunately, California Indian languages have just not been developing well until very recently. It's just there's no teaching materials for you know, so no workbook, no grammar workbooks, no nothing that that people have been using or can use for quite some time. So that's one of the reasons that we just have to focus on immersion. And one thing that's a little different is that we also have this program, the Breath of Life Archival Institute for California Languages. And there they can, we started it at first for those languages that have no speakers. But as the time goes on, we've been asking Master Apprentice teams to come to Breath of Life 2 so that they can look at the documentation on their languages. But the documentation also is not, it was never made for people to learn language. It was made for linguists and anthropologists. And so it's not really teaching materials. It's materials that they can use. And in fact, one of the things that's been going on very recently is linguists repurposing these materials and redesigning them to be for language learners instead of for linguists. And so a number of the languages now, I know of 6 or 7 where linguists have focused on repurposing the old field notes and technical grammars into things that people can use to learn grammar from. So one thing that we found with the Master Apprentice program versus learning from, well, we've gone to places to do training where there are materials, such as most recently we went to the Samis in Sweden, and they were saying, well, we have this, we have all these things on computer and everything where we learn the grammar, but we can't speak, we can't converse. And so they need the Master Apprentice program to help them learn how to converse. And the problem with the Master Apprentice program is that you can learn to converse and you can converse quite fluently, but your grammar is not that good if you're learning as an adult. And so it's definitely great if you can have both. And again, a few languages in California have gone through Master Apprentice, and then the community has gotten a linguist to come and start teaching them actual grammatical information. So I think you need both if you're going to speak fluently and grammatically.
Nice.
And you're learning from an adult, as an adult.
Right. Okay, we have. Hi, Tatum. Go ahead.
Hi.
You're
Can I say
good to
something?
nice to see you and love to hear it.
So at our language nest, we tried that too, the natural approach, and just doing the natural approach, and realized that we need the grammar. What the grammar does is it just makes everything move much quicker for the parent. So offering them that 1 hour, it's only 1 hour a week of grammar lessons. Well, when we're physically gathering, now we're doing videos, but doing that, we felt made a huge difference just in boosting the speed of the language, but the conversation is definitely most important. And we noticed that a lot of students coming out of the immersion program before were having the grammar skills, the knowledge of the grammar and not necessarily the conversational skills. So I agree with what she's saying about needing both. You really need both. The grammar boosts it and makes them learn quicker, and the conversational just makes them be able to speak naturally to each other.
Nice.
Thank
Thanks. That was Tatum McCummer from Mohawk Nation. She was our speaker last week, and she's doing a nest. They are doing a nest. Okay. Other comments about that? Rochelle, did you want to say anything? Nancy wants to say something. Go ahead.
I was just wondering.
Because
I was just wondering because I was a native language teacher for a long time. When I don't know what you mean by grammar. We called it paradigms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Migo,
That,
yeah.
Wisin it, when in wisin it. A sentence of wisin. We have a language table here with adults, and that's what we're doing. whatever that word is, we added on to ginitam or something like that. Nin we send gin we send we send Nineba, those things like a sentence, a little sentence. I find that SK and JK really like that. Junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten, they really liked a little sentence like somebody said, "Numbe, wisinin." Then sit down, wisnida, both of us. And then if somebody else comes in at the door and says, "What are you doing?" Ni wisinin, we are eating. Ambe gegi, wisинida. I just wondered as I think a little sentence in the middle, in at the tail of that word should have a little something in there. That's how I understood English.
It reminds me of what Joey was saying about taking one verb and using it in many ways then after they have a foundation. They knows what
He's
that
right.
verb is.
I understand that too.
Yeah.
Mia.
Miigwech.
I see another comment there. I was wondering if I could comment on it.
Sure.
Documentation made for linguists. Hope this is changing. It is changing, and but it's sort of shocking how long it takes to be changing. There was one guy that did a pedagogical grammar of one of the Chumash languages in California as his dissertation. It was the first dissertation that was actually allowed to happen at a university that was pedagogical in nature instead of technical for other linguists. But linguists are really changing. We have at the University of California at Berkeley, which I'm retired from, but I'm still teaching a little bit, and I'm co-teaching a course on language revitalization now, and the course is really aimed at training linguists to. Well, it's aimed at both linguists and community members that are at the university, but it's really training linguists to see language as something human rather than a code to break, and to help linguists see the passion that people feel for their languages and how important it is that if they're going to be working with an Indigenous language, how important it is for them to be working for the sake of the people there instead of for the sake of some group of linguists who actually will probably never read it anyway.
Miigwech, Leanne. We have another question which comes from the staff. They're struggling with baby and toddler assessment with the Language Nest.
So it's really tough when you're trying to assess babies and toddlers. And so what we actually did is we do not assess them until they start getting up to about 2 years of age, because at that point that's when they're kind of starting to get out of the babble more, and they're trying to use what they're taking in, what they're hearing. And a funny story, we our babies were getting up to about 2.5 years of age, and we were outside. The teachers were outside playing with them, and one of the boys said a perfectly structured 3-word sentence. There was a guy cutting grass outside, And that little boy turned to the guy, pointed at him, and said, "Ho moham eneose kanesan inani." That man is cutting grass, he said. And the teachers were like, holy crap, this little guy just said a perfectly structured sentence. So as that summer went on, again, they were outside playing. We try to get them out as much as possible every day, all week long, because that's our element, is being outside. And so again, the kids were outside, and one of the little girls, there was a couple of Pinashiwak eagles that were flying, kind of circling around, making their way over where the daycare is at. And one of the little girls looked up, and all the kids started looking up, and one of the little girls says, "Oh, henit spimehnet ino pinashi." Again, perfectly structured, perfectly grammatical. She said, "Oh, there's an eagle flying," is what she had said. So right about that time was when, if you remember earlier, I mentioned one of our trainees went on to become a linguist, got his degree at Madison. And he had just came back. He was doing some summer work. And right at that point, at about the 2-year age point, we started keeping track of assessing what their comprehension was, and also assessing their productivity. So he would, just in a normal day, he wouldn't pull the kids out into a different atmosphere. He would just mingle in with the teachers and with the kids, play and roll around on the grass with them. But he would ask them sequencing questions to see how well they were comprehending. Like maybe he would tell them, lay on the grass with me, then sit up, then rise to your feet and turn in a circle. So, I mean, just as an example, I don't know if he actually used those or not, but he was trying sequencing to see how they were comprehending what was being told to them. And of the 8 babies, 7 of the babies performed wonderfully. He first started with three sequences, then he moved to 4 sequences, and then he would give them multiple sequencing, 3, 4, or 5 different commands in a single sentence. So he was assessing their comprehension just to see how well they were performing, what they were understanding. And of course, as we kind of neared the end of that year, they started aging up to that 3-year-old mark, and more of them were becoming more and more verbal. So at that point, he started, I believe in the linguistic world, they call it probing through oral proficiency interviews. Just real simple things. He would ask maybe he would hold up a ball, a red ball, and he would ask the kids, when I owe it. And he would cue them off, who is this? Because to us, a ball is living. So he would give them a little cue right away to know that who is this, not what is this. Then the kids would, based on what they would say, if they would use the appropriate color, is it living? Is it round? Is it square? Then he might ask them, well, what are you doing with this? What do we do with him or her? Then the kids might say something, oh, we play with him. So we start our comprehension at about 2.5 years of age. And then as they kind of round out that year, we start doing more of a verbal assessment on the kids to see how they're doing, what their structure is like, what they're picking up. And the lady before said something about teaching grammar right along with the language classes. And that is just interesting to me because we haven't quite reached that point. Like I said, our babies are getting to the 4-year-old mark now. And with the babies that have been in the program since they were weeks or months old, for right now, and I don't know how it's going to be in the future, but right now their grammar and their linguistics is spot on. But that all goes back to your teachers being competent teachers too. Your teachers need to, just like Nancy was saying, like there's more than one way to say eat when they're sitting at the table, because we eat family style in the immersion rooms. So you would teach them, I'm eating, we're all eating, but not you're eating. Somebody comes in and, hey, come eat with us. And, you know, then include them, he or she is eating. So they introduce all of those different types of verb usage as they're going through their daily routine. So that's something I've wondered though, is because with the babies, they're just naturally learning all these linguistic and grammatical changes, but with our parents, we're having to teach them how to make these changes. So I'm curious to see how they're going to be as the babies start to grow up, if we're going to need to go down that road and specifically start teaching grammatical classes, or if they're just going to continually naturally pick it up. I'm very curious to see how our next few years are going to unfold with them.
Can I just, for the immersion nest that she was discussing, the parents attend also, and so I'm not sure whether the grammar lesson she was mentioning is for the parents or the kids. So maybe that would be because I'm not sure, but my impression was that the grammar lesson was more for the parents than the kids.
The grammar lesson is for the parents. The children are playing and they're just going about their day just as normal, playing and just having fun. And the parents are the students, and they're doing the grammar lessons.
Okay.
But the feedback we got, especially from beginner parents, was that it's like doing learning math formulas or putting together Lego.
Yeah.
That's how they compared it to, and it's like, oh my God, it makes so much sense, you know. And wow. The kids just learn it naturally, like just going about their day. Just to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We have just a minute left. Is there any last things you want to say to us, Joey and Leanne? We thank you for your wonderful years of work for our languages and all you're doing. It's a lot of hard work. We know you're not in it for the pay. And I feel very inspired just to know that other people are going through the same stuff and that you've been successful. It's wonderful to hear.
I sure learned a lot from Joey. I really loved listening to you, Joey. And I love your metaphors too. The canoes and the weather.
Yes, Waiwan, and it was truly an honor to be a part of this webinar with you, Leanne. And yeah, you know, one of the, I guess my last comment, one of our elders we worked with, she would always tell us, "Poninita," don't ever give up. Always keep trying, keep moving forward, no matter what happens in life. Poninita, our language needs to live, is what she would always tell us. So I would just share that little bit with all of you out here at this time. I hope.
Poninita, miigwech. We'll see you next. Poninita.
Hey,
We'll see you. Hope to see you all next week. We have 2 more presentations left. Next week is Mary Thundercloud from the Ho-Chunk Nation with someone else from her school as well. I don't know if she's still on. She was on earlier. And the following week, we're going to ask our presenters to all come back. Nahilima, the preschool teacher from Hawaii that many of us have seen in action, is going to talk. And we're going to ask to have a little panel discussion with all the presenters in the series. So we have 2 more weeks left. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mary.
miigwech,
Wonderful to meet everyone.
Yahoo.
Thanks so much for coming.